Good morning, everyone. As Leanne said, my name is Sanjeev Chowdhury. I'm from Halifax, Nova Scotia. I work at Global Affairs. Thank you. Is anybody here from Halifax? Where from in Halifax? I was born in Clayton Park. What's your name, sir? Oh yeah. Well, I probably know half of your relatives too. There's only 2 degrees of separation in Nova Scotia. They're not more than that. But at any rate, we'll talk later. But I was from Clayton Park, and we didn't have a lot of time for you folks from Rockingham. So, at any rate, maybe we can patch up our differences here. At any rate, we are on a Cross Canada tour. I'm from Global Affairs Canada. You'll often hear it referred to as GAC. It used to be called the Department of Foreign Affairs and International Trade. Then it was called the Department of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Development. And now, with our new government, we've changed the name to GAC, Global Affairs Canada. It comprises foreign affairs, international trade, and international development. So we're on a road trip, 3-week road trip, actually, across Canada, and this is our last stop. So I guess we saved the best for last. Yeah. And I should tell you that I learned one thing very early on about Leanne, and it's just 3 words that come to mind when you deal with Leanne. Resistance is futile. So, yeah, we're here, happy to be in Banff. And I have to say, I've done this. This is our 10th province. It's our final stop. As I said, we head back tomorrow morning to Ottawa. It has been a pleasure to work with you. You're a logistical genius, and now there are 2 of us in Canada. So I'm very happy to no longer be alone. And we've had a great time. And I will tell you another thing, and I mean this very sincerely. I have never had on the road a better meal than I had last night here. Yeah, the food was fabulous. Yeah, I didn't like the breakfast very much this morning, but the dinner last night made up for it. It was great. So thank you for that. Thank you for the kind invitation. We just made it here in the nick of time yesterday. Our plane was 45 minutes late. And the reason is that we flew from Edmonton, where we did an event. We flew to Calgary, and there was a lot of TV cameras and stuff in Calgary when we arrived. I didn't understand why. I thought this must be Leanne's doing, but then I found out that they mistook Christopher McLean here on the far right. They thought it was the giant panda arriving by air. But in fact, they're arriving later today in Calgary, and there was a big confusion. So that's why we were late. We drove here, and we got here late, but we came in. And where's Elan? Where are you? There she is at the back. Stand up. This lovely woman invited us to her table. She got us our food, even though we were late. And we had a great time with you last night. So I wanted to thank you for making us feel so welcome. There were other tables that when we walked in, they said, these chairs are taken, but we noticed that nobody sat there for the rest of the night. So I don't know what we looked like when we walked in here. Maybe we looked like 3 bums looking for a free meal, but we were not. So Elan, thank you very much for welcoming us. That was beautiful. And I do also want to tell you that the team that we have here, which I will introduce in a moment, they are both from our Canadian embassies in Europe. Our first guest on my immediate right is from Vienna, Austria, and I'll introduce him more formally later, but posted at our Canadian embassy. He's a Canadian diplomat, a senior trade commissioner, and next to him, of course, is our favorite giant panda, Christopher McLean, who is our senior trade commissioner in Berlin, and again, I will introduce them in more detail later. What we're doing here is we're on a cross-Canada tour to talk about CETA. Has Todd left, or? Yeah, okay, good, because he made 2 mistakes, which I will correct in his presentation. I wasn't going to do that, but first of all, there are not 27 countries in the EU, there are 28, and number 2, the Philippines is not part of the TPP. So, there you go, Todd, on you. I will say, though, we've had a lot of great presentations over the last 3 weeks, but his was fantastic. And I'm going to see if we can bring him to Ottawa sometime to give us an overview, not just about the Alberta economy, but I have to say I learned a lot in the last 45 minutes listening to him. I thought it was a fantastic presentation. I do want to, before I go and introduce some of the other folks that are here from the team, Leanne, I do want to ask you one question, which I should have asked you before. I noticed that this is being taped. What is it being taped for? Because I swear a lot, so I need to just decide, is that going to be seen anywhere? Great. As long as there are edits, we're going to keep our original shtick here, because if my boss sees this, I'm not so sure she's going to be very pleased, because I swear like a sailor, a Nova Scotia sailor, as you will understand. Okay. The last key member of our team is at the back here, and we brought him along not because he's my right-hand man from Ottawa, but because he's a native Albertan from Calgary. Jordan Turley, ladies and gentlemen, who's here. He is Canada's greatest PowerPoint clicker. And so, as you know, we're into job creation in Ottawa, and he is 28 years old and has studied overseas in Paris. He's worked at our Canadian embassy in Paris, and I would say that in the last 9 months that I've been on the job, my greatest decision 6.5 months ago was to hire him. He is not only my traveling companion, I hate him, but we travel very well together, and but he's a genius. So we are very pleased and proud to have a native Albertan on our team to explain CETA, and you will see all of the work that you're about to see is courtesy of Jordan Turley. He's the brains, I'm just the looks. Now, we are going to walk you through CETA very quickly, and then each of these fine gentlemen here on stage are going to tell you a little bit about the countries where they work and how CETA can benefit you. But we are going to get started, and we're going to make this interactive. So are you ready to learn in the next 50 minutes? Are you ready to learn a little bit about the Canada-EU Comprehensive Economic... You are excited to go. What's your name, ma'am? Natalie. Okay, good. Please remain calm. Now, here we go. Are you ready? All right, let's get started. Thank you. Can you hear me? James, let's put up the volume there a little bit. Okay, here we go. All right, everybody. We're going to teach you about CETA in 50 minutes or less. You're going to leave here and you're going to be an expert. Let's go, Jordan. That's me. Okay, CETA. It came into effect 6 months ago, September 21st. And we're not going to lie to you. Up until the 21st of September, we still had 25% of our stuff going into the EU tariff-free. So it wasn't from zero. But overnight, we went from 25% to 98%. 98% of all goods going into the EU now from Canada are going in at its zero tariff. This trade agreement has been called the world's greatest, and you're going to see why in a few minutes. Is it perfect? No, far from it, but it's pretty close to perfect. Thank you, sir. Okay, so here we go. Benefits for Alberta. We have a special webpage, which I'm going to show you in a few minutes, that highlights some of the benefits for Alberta. And we just put a little pictograph up here for you to show you what are the major sectors that we feel could benefit the most from this agreement for Alberta companies. And I see a lovely woman here taking pictures, not of me, but of the screen. We are going to send this presentation to Leanne, so you don't have to worry about taking any notes or whatever. If you want a copy, please ask Leanne. And if she operates with you like she does with us, before you've even sent the email, the presentation will be in your inbox. So here we go. Aerospace, agriculture, machinery and equipment, metals and minerals, and aerospace are the top 4 sectors. 35% of your merchandise exports from Alberta are in the agriculture sector. We had agriculture specialists with us in Calgary 2 weeks ago, in Edmonton 2 days ago, and Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, not Global Affairs Canada, not my department, but Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada they have an office in Calgary, a regional office. They handle all of the agricultural exports for the Government of Canada, but we're happy to answer any questions you may have on that later on. Let's keep going. This is our most important slide in the presentation because it gives you the address of our webpage about CETA. Does anybody know what CETA stands for? Something happened there. Jordan is screwing up already. Here we go. Go back, Jordan. CETA, there we go. CETA, CETA. Ellen, do you know what that means?
I think it means the Canada-European Union Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement.
Wrong. So what it means is this. Everybody thinks CETA, the CE stands for Canada-Europe. It doesn't. It took me 3 months to figure this out when I started the job. The Canada-EU part comes before CETA. So it's called the Canada-EU CETA. CETA stands for Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, okay? Now, on this webpage, which we're going to show you in a second, we're going to walk you through it very quickly because later on you may have clients, you may have people that want to know more about the agreement. You can just send them to this website. I should tell you that Pierre-Marc Johnson, the former Premier of Quebec, he is the CETA champion for the province of Quebec, and he told me that this webpage, in his opinion, is the best Government of Canada webpage on the platform today. Of course, I agree with him because I developed it. But it is really simple to use, and we're going to show you how it works. But I want to show you these 6 circles here because you can click on any one of them, and you'll get a whole bunch of very valuable information. I want to only highlight 2 to you right now, and we're going to show you one of them later on. But the top right, Exporting to the EU, a guide for Canadian business. This is a really helpful step-by-step guide to teach you how
to export to the EU if you've never done so, or if you have done so or are doing so. It gives you a great amount of information on things that perhaps you might want to look at, that you might be wanting more information on. And on the bottom is the CETA promotion toolkit. We're going to show you that in a second too. And that's going to give you all kinds of information about the agreement. But let's click on the link. Jordan's going to click on there, and we're going to show it to you live, we hope. Now, this is not supposed to pop up, but something will. Here we go. This is our landing page. It's really simple. We just want to walk you through it. It'll take about 5 minutes, and we're going to show you what you will find on this page. Of course, on any Government of Canada website, we start off with a picture and video from our boss, the Minister of International Trade, François-Philippe Champagne. That's him. You can look at that video. It's only about 3 minutes long, where he talks about the agreement. When we go down, so that's what is CETA. That's the first section. The second section, what does CETA mean for Canadian companies? There are 6 links there. The last one is just a list there, CETA Business Forums. That's a list of all the workshops and things that are taking place across Canada on this agreement. We will have a few more events after today, but if you ever want to see where we're going to be, and if you want to follow us, if you enjoy the session today and you'd like to come with us on the road, just click on there and you will get a list of where we're going to be in the future. What does CETA mean for foreign investors? We're going to skip that part today because we're not here really to talk about foreign investment right now. We will a little later on, but that's a section for foreign investors. Then the EU for you is our kind of highlight of the page, and you're going to see those 6 circles again in a second, but first I want to show you the middle one called the EU's markets. Now, Todd said there are 27. There are actually 28 countries in the EU. Jordan's going to click on there and you're going to see them all. What we've done here is we have put a 3 or 4 pager on each country. So let's say, for example, Romania is there. We're not going to click on it, but let's just say that you're interested in exporting something to Romania, or you want to find out a little bit more information about Romania. You can click on there. You'll get a 3-4 pager about that country, about what sectors we think as a federal government hold the greatest promise for Canadian companies, SMEs in particular, and easy peasy. You can read it later on. Next to that is something called the Canada Tariff Finder. We're going to come back to that in a minute. That's an online tool to help you figure out what tariff you would pay to ship your good to Europe. Now,
Sanjeev?
What?
Can I interrupt you for a second?
You just did.
Could you maybe go back to the EU's markets for a second? I think we might have some people in the room who are interested in knowing about the United Kingdom.
Oh yeah, Brexit. How many people here have heard of Brexit? I guess everybody, right? Okay, yes. The UK, maybe that's why Todd said there are 27 countries, but actually there are 28. The UK is still part of the EU. It's going to be officially part of the EU till March 19th next year, so until a year from now. And then after that, they will follow the rules and regulations of the EU system till December 31st, 2020. And then we'll see what happens after that. They're negotiating, of course, their exit from the EU. So Brexit is an issue that we should all be aware of. But the good news is that right now, up until the end of December 2020, the UK is part of the EU. All of the agreements, all of the provisions under CETA apply to any trade that you do with the UK. And we will see what Canada does with the UK afterwards. They cannot negotiate a free trade agreement or an agreement with any country while they're still part of the EU. So that's the rules of the EU system. So we've had just preliminary discussions with them. The UK Prime Minister was in Ottawa with Prime Minister Trudeau a few months ago. They said that they would look at the CETA agreement as a model going forward, but for the time being, the UK is part of the EU, and they've actually indicated to us that they will ratify the agreement before they leave the EU. 28 countries, all 28 have to ratify the agreement for it to come fully into effect, but for all intensive purposes, it's in effect. Yesterday we had our 9th country out of 28 ratify the agreement. That was Sweden. So we have 9 out of 28 done already. This takes a long time. The EU has an agreement with South Korea. It took 4 years for that to be fully ratified. The good news for us is that we have the agreement in place. It's called provisional application, which is a bunch of gobbledygook, basically, that we have to call it, because we can't legally say it's fully in effect. But in general, all the major provisions are in effect until all of the parliaments ratify the agreement. All right, now we go down to the toolkit. You already saw this a minute ago when you saw the top right circle, exporting to the EU, a guide for Canadian business. But I would like to, and there's other stuff there. expanding into the EU with the TCS. I'm going to talk about the TCS in a moment, but I want to click on the CETA Promotion Toolkit. This is an icon that we added for the September 21st entry into force of the agreement. And I just want to show you two sections here that I think you would find particularly interesting. The first is CETA benefit fact sheets by province and region. What we did here is that we took the agreement, we looked at every province, and we created these sheets that were, again, 2 3-pager, sometimes it's 4 pages long. And if you're a large province like Alberta, you get more than one entry. Some of the smaller provinces, like my beloved Nova Scotia, is just Nova Scotia. But in Alberta, if you go to the top, Jordan, we have one for Alberta overall. Then if you go down, we have one there, Calgary-Edmonton corridor. We've got Northern Alberta. We have, I know we have Southern Alberta. And yeah, so you guys get 4. So on those sheets, you'll just see how we've analyzed the agreement and where we see the best opportunities we think for you, if you're in one of those regions, to benefit from this agreement. Next to that, you see something called CETA benefits by sector. So in there, we have aerospace, agriculture, mines and minerals, oil and gas. 4 right there off the top that are of particular interest, I would believe, to Albertans. And you can click on those one of those 12 and read more about it later on. But the good news is that we have highlighted the 12 sectors. It doesn't mean that those are the only 12. It means that those are the 12 that we think hold the most promise for Canadian companies, SMEs in particular, to get the most out of this agreement. All right, let's go back. I want to just show you this online tool called the Canada Tariff Finder. The Canada Tariff Finder is an online tool that we have developed with BDC and EDC. We've got a great friend here, Kenneth, from the BDC. He sat with us at dinner last night. That's your name, right? Good. I asked him yesterday if he goes by Ken or Kenneth. He said he prefers Sir, so we're going to call him that. What we want to show you here is the Canada Tariff Finder. Now we're going to click on there. And it's an online tool. It's not the easiest tool in the world to use, but it's the best we've got right now. And you'll see that you'll see the logo of BDC and EDC, which are 2 of your sponsors of this wonderful conference. You'll see something called the Trade Commissioner Service there, TCS, and then you'll see the logo for Canada, the Government of Canada. What this is an online tool. It's 3 steps, and it helps you figure out what tariff you would pay if you wanted to export a good to the EU. Now, before we show you how it works, because like I said, it's not the greatest tool in the world, but it's the best we've got. We're sinking a bunch of money into it. Kenneth doesn't know this, but I told him last night. We have just signed an agreement initiated by my group with the BDC and the EDC. We're sinking a whole bunch of money into this online tool, and we're going to make it more intuitive. So you'll see improvements to it start to be rolled out as of April 1st. And I'm going to give you a demonstration of it in a moment. But first, I'd like to go back to the top of the page and explain to you what is the TCS. It is a very important thing to know, the Trade Commissioner Service. The Trade Commissioner Service is a group of Canadians and foreigners that are hired by the Government of Canada who work in in 5 regional offices in Canada and in all of our embassies and consulates overseas. We are a service to help Canadian companies, SMEs in particular, increase their exports to foreign markets. The service is free. I'm a trade commissioner. Simon Pierre, wave your hand up there. Simon Pierre from Vienna is our Canadian senior trade commissioner in Vienna, Austria. Next to him is Christopher McLean, our Canadian senior trade commissioner at our Canadian embassy in Berlin. Okay, so besides the Canadians, Christopher has a big team in his office in Berlin in the embassy. A lot of Canadians, a lot of Germans that have been there for years that know everything about trade with Germany. They're all specialized by sector. They're there to help you. Same with Simon Pierre. His team is a little smaller because our embassy in Vienna is smaller. They'll explain to you about that later on. These services are free. They're free. We work for you. Your taxes pay for us to do this work for you. Please register with the TCS, the Canadian Trade Commissioner Service. We have a Chief Trade Commissioner in Ottawa, a woman by the name of Dr. Ailish Campbell. And Ailish says that the TCS, unfortunately, is Canada's best kept secret. So we want to make sure you learn about it, that you use us. You won't believe this, but we have 900 trade commissioners in 160 cities around the world. Okay? So, Jitan De Silva, our wonderful speaker last night, my good friend, who I haven't seen in 7 years. She and I were in ambassador school together in 2011. She went to Chicago. I went to Rio de Janeiro, a very terrible posting. I was there for 5.5 years. It was awful being there for the World Cup and the Olympics and the Paralympics. I just hated it. But anyway, so I was there for the last 5.5 years. And we had trade commissioners in my office. We had 2 Canadians and we had 4 Brazilians. And these people know the market, let me tell you, especially the locally engaged staff, the LES we call them. They're fantastic. So we want you to register. We want you to use our service. I should tell you also that in addition to having all of these Canadians and foreign staff around the world, we have 5 offices in Canada. We call them ROs, regional offices. So we have an office in Vancouver, in Calgary, Montreal, Toronto, and Halifax. The Calgary office covers the prairies. So they have Canadian trade commissioners in Saskatchewan and Manitoba, and in Edmonton, of course. If you have questions or you want to look at a market overseas, all of the trade staff have been trained in all of these regional offices. They've been trained in CETA by my folks in Ottawa. They know the agreement now very well. They can sit down, they can walk you through it. If you have any questions, make an appointment. The head of the office in Calgary is Daryl Davies. He was with us yesterday in Edmonton, in fact. But I would encourage you to register, become a client, use our services. We are there to help you, all right? That's the TCS Trade Commissioner Service. Let's go down and show these wonderful people how the Canada Tariff Finder works. This is the most boring part of the presentation, but the good news is that it only takes 5 minutes to walk you through it. Here we go. We're going to get started. We click on that little thing there, and then it's a 3-step process. The first step is already done for you, so you only have to enter information in number 2 and number 3. So we're going to ask somebody here to pick a country, and we're going to enter it in there. Sir, you look very excited by this Canada Tariff Finder, and I would like to ask you to pick a country in the EU.
Germany.
Germany. Okay, so Jordan is going to type in Germany there. Look, it's a drop-down thing. Beautiful. All right, now we're going to pick a product. I said he was a great clicker. He's not the brightest guy in the room, but let's pick a product. Let's pick a product from somebody who laughed the hardest. Oh, where's this woman over here who is very excited about?
Right over here, Sanjeev.
Where? Oh, this is great. Okay. I would like you to have the honor of picking a product.
A beverage.
Okay.
I think she's a big drinker, folks. I think she's still drunk from last night at the hospitality suite. How many fingers am I holding up here?
A milk-based beverage.
A milk-based beverage. Beautiful.
All right.
Very nice choice. All right? Type it in there, Jordan. Beautiful. Nice. Thank you very much for your participation, ladies and gentlemen. All right. Click on there, Jordan. Very nice. And look what happens. Okay, so here we have our milk-based product in Germany. We're going to click there on line telephone sets, cordless handsets. Why did we do this, ladies and gentlemen? We did it because we played around to find something really easy, simple to find that everybody understands. Everybody knows what a cordless handset is. In fact, today is the first time we're actually using one. It's been hooked up, I think, to a cordless mic anyway. Christopher McLean is looking a bit more like Madonna than he is like a giant panda. He's got one of these fancy microphones on. Anyway, if you click on line, telephone, let's just click on there just to show you how it works. So if you go down, you'll get a little report. Stop right there, Jordan, please. You get an HS code. That will tell you what the code is for your product. Go down. There'll be 2 paragraphs, one on tariffs and one on rules of origin. And it tells you a little bit about what your product has to have in it to be considered Canadian. But under tariffs, if you go down, you'll see a chart. And it'll show you what the tariff is. Look at that, it's 0.
Holy cow.
Yeah, amazing, huh? What a great choice. What luck that we picked Germany and milk products. Look at that. So there you go, your tariff rate is 0. You would pay nothing in taxes, well, taxes are separate. You wouldn't pay anything in tariffs to ship your cordless handsets that you've produced in Alberta over to France. All right, let's go back, Jordan, to the web page. And let's see, where do we go from here? I should tell you that on this Canada Tariff Finder, we have not just the EU countries in there, but we also have countries with which Canada has a free trade agreement. Does anybody in this room know how many free trade agreements Canada currently has with the rest of the world? Anybody? Put up your hand if you know the answer, because we have a nice prize from Europe for the person who guesses correctly. Miss, you look like you'd like to make a guess.
Oh, gee. 45.
45. Okay, interesting choice. Free trade agreements. How many free trade agreements do we have, Canada, currently in the world? Sir?
Dozen.
Dozen. 12. So we have 45 and 12. Look at the difference already. It's pretty. This lovely lady here wants to make a guess. You have to speak in the mic because this is being broadcast live on CNN.
5.
5. Okay, 5. So we have 45, 5, and a dozen. The answer is 13. 13, ladies and gentlemen. We have 13 free trade agreements with 44 countries. 44 countries, okay? 28 of which are the EU. So what do we have? Just to give you an example, we have a free trade agreement with South Korea. We have one with Chile, with Peru, with Israel, with Ukraine, and of course, the most famous, NAFTA, Canada, US, Mexico. That's just to give you an example. We have 13. We will soon have 14. Todd mentioned the TPP, which is now called the CPTPP. 11 countries. When you take out the countries in that list, of which the Philippines is not one, and you net it with some of the ones in there, like Mexico, Peru, we already have free trade agreements with. But when you net out the countries with which we don't have a free trade agreement, we are going to go to 14 FTAs with 51 countries. When will the CPTPP come into effect? We expect it will kick in about a year from now. Because of the 11 countries, for it to become into force, 6 of the 11 countries have to ratify it in their parliaments. And we expect that will happen by March of 2019. So hopefully, maybe, next year or sooner, Leanne will invite us back to this beautiful place, and maybe we'll be able to give you a little run-through on the CPTPP 1 year from now. Stay tuned for it. You're going to love it. Okay, let's keep going, Jordan. I think that's all we want to show you on our landing page.
That was the end of this part of the presentation.
Yes, let's go to the next slide. But please do go and check out our international.gc for Government of Canada.ca for Canada /CETA, and you will get a very nice overview. If you're suffering from insomnia, you can read some of the chapters of the CETA agreement, but it's a pretty good website. Just to sum up the agreement for you guys, there are 5 major parts of it. You already know, we're going to start from the right and go clockwise. Ambitious tariff elimination, we've already talked that. We beat a dead horse. 98% of tariffs are at 0 today. Oh, by the way, we will go to 99%. We will negotiate, we've already negotiated it, but the extra 1% will be phased in over the next 7 years. What is in that 1%? It's some of the sensitive areas where exporters on both sides of the ocean wanted more time to adjust before the tariff dropped to 0. I will give you a very simple example. Live lobster went from 8% tariff to 0 on September 21st. But frozen lobster is at 12%, and it is being phased in over the next 7 years. I don't know why, but the frozen lobster folks wanted more time, I guess, for the tariff to kick in. It's being phased in over the next 7 years at around 2% per year drop. So it'll go from 12, 10, 8, 6, 4 to 0. And at the end of 7 years, all fish and seafood products will be at 0. We've had some very big drops. Mackerel went from 20% to 0 overnight. Oysters, mussels, they all went to 0 as well. But some of them will be phased in. And what is the last 1% that will never be touched? That's stuff in very sensitive sectors that each country wants to protect, like defense, education, social services, public health, culture, and some agricultural products, correct, where we will have tariff rate quotas for the foreseeable future. Number 2, access to public procurement. This is really neat in this agreement, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to be able to bid on government contracts in Europe now. It's a $3.3 trillion market, Canadian dollar. They can also bid on our contracts here, government procurement contracts in Canada. All you do is you register. On the EU website, you can pull up all the tenders and you can see if there's anything there that you might be interested in bidding on. There is one general exemption under public procurement. It's general because some sectors have different thresholds. But in general, if the contract is $350,000 or less, you cannot bid on it. Why? because we want to protect SMEs in the EU and SMEs in Canada. So we don't let the big boys from Europe, for example, and girls, bid on contracts that are $350,000 or less in Canada. We want to give an advantage to our SMEs and vice versa. But in general, anything over $350,000, you can bid on it. Okay? Third, enhanced labor mobility. We love this one. Has anybody heard about this under this agreement? Has anybody heard about the enhanced labor mobility provisions under CETA? Besides Jordan here, anybody else? Anybody? What have you heard about it? I'm just curious. What have you heard about it? And then I'm going to tell you about it very quickly, because this is a really neat thing.
I actually worked on it at Global Affairs.
You did? Okay. Very nice. Thank you for your help. Because of you, we all have jobs here today, and we're in beautiful Banff. So what do you know about it, just in a nutshell?
In a nutshell, it's negotiated country by country. It's not reciprocal. It's reciprocal on balance, but not. It doesn't necessarily have the same provisions per country. But in a nutshell, in certain highly skilled professions, it allows for greater movement between the countries. So you would potentially be able to send, engineers to do certain projects to work as independent professionals or contractual service suppliers.
Absolutely correct. Let's give her a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Very nice. She's right. And now let me tell you, there are 3 groups of workers who can now go over to Europe with less bureaucracy vis-a-vis the visa system than before. Number 1, short-term business visitors. What does that mean? You're a businessman or woman, you want to go over and talk to some people about doing business with them. As long as no cash exchanges hands, you can go over as a short-term business visitor, and you can stay in Europe for 3 months out of 6 without having to worry about your visa. Now, as this nice woman said, these are general guidelines that I'm giving you because there are 28 countries in the EU, and you do have to check with each country's embassy or consulate before you send somebody over or you go over to ensure that you meet the criteria, because each country has kept the right to enforce this or not. But in general, it's working quite well. Short-term business visitors, 90 days out of 120. Number 2, independent service specialists, i.e. consultants. Consultants can go over there for the period of a year or the term of the contract, whichever is shorter. Can you be extended? Yes, at the discrepancy of the host government. Now, you can't waltz out of grade 12 here in Calgary and go over, get on a plane and land in Europe and say, I'm a consultant and I'm going to be living here for the next year. There are requirements. For example, you have to have a certain level of education. Number 2, you have to have a certain number of years of experience. In this case, it's 7. Why are these little provisions put into effect? Because the Europeans, rightly so, want to ensure that people who are coming over are really consultants and that they're not just coming over there to live illegally, that they will come back to their home, Canada, when they're done. Okay, so that's number 2. Number 1 was short-term business visitors. Number 2 is the independent service specialist. Number 3, the easiest one, I think, to understand, is called intra-corporate transferees. Very easy to understand. You have a company in Canada. It has an office in Europe. You can send one of your employees from your office in Canada over to your office in Europe to work. For how long? 3 years or the length of the assignment, whichever, again, is shorter. Can it be renewed? Yes, it can, at the discretion of the host government. My tip to all of you is that if you have some working in your office here, send him or her over to Europe and just keep renewing them. Never see them again. What's your name there on the video? Please edit that out. That's a secret between me and everybody in this room. That doesn't mean that these guys, by the way, who are sent to Europe were and we want to get rid of them. I didn't mean that. I just saw Christopher's face when I said that. You guys are excellent, which is why you're on this tour. But I'm saying that for you guys. Sorry, guys, I didn't mean that. For you. Ooh, yikes. Okay, anyway. Last 2, which I'm going to combine into 1. Streamline customs and trade facilitation. We've simplified the bureaucracy. Is it still a lot of bureaucracy? Yeah. It's a free trade agreement, but it's a lot easier than it was in the past. We can get into that later if you have questions, but why I want to tie it to the last one, clear rules of origin, is because it's really important that people understand rules of origin. Everybody in this room knows that it's one of the sticking factors in our negotiations on NAFTA, rules of origin, particularly when it comes to automobiles. But on this one, we have rules of origin. Every product is different. It comes down to this. This is the easiest way to understand it. Is your product Canadian or not? If you've caught a lobster in Nova Scotia, it's pretty obvious that it's a Canadian lobster. You get your catch certificate. If you're growing wheat in Alberta, it's called wholly obtained. You've got your certificate. It's pretty obvious that it's a Canadian product. What if you have a product, like let's say, for example, you've got a ton of stuffed animals that were made in China, filled with stuff from Vietnam, in your warehouse in Mexico. And you bring that stuff up here to Calgary, let's say, or Edmonton, and you want to ship it over to the EU. Is that Canadian? No. Just because it's come from Canada doesn't mean it's Canadian. Now, some people have very complicated products, like in a product that might be a technical product or AI product or an ICT product, and you've got components in it that are from Canada, the US, China, Japan, who knows? You've got a mishmash of stuff. How do you decide whether or not you want to take the risk to export it and whether it will be considered a Canadian product or not? Here is the beauty of this agreement. We have a new mechanism called the BOI. Luckily, they added the I at the end, or it would have been called the BO. BOI, Binding Origin Information. What it is that you can apply through your customs broker, your customs broker in the EU. You can fill out a bunch of paperwork. You can apply to the EU customs authorities. They have 4 months within which to render a decision, 4 months or less. They will look at everything, and they will give you a written ruling. Yes, this product will be considered Canadian. And when you get that written ruling, it applies to all of the member states. It's an insurance policy. So you don't send your stuff over there, and all of a sudden, they say, hey, this doesn't meet the rules of origin criteria in our opinion. You're going to have to pay a tariff on this. You can protect yourselves by getting an advance ruling. Okay, this is new. It's an incredible mechanism. We recommend that everybody do it if you're not sure about your product and your customs broker indicates that they're not sure either. It's worth doing. It's a great, great, great feature. Let's keep going. All right, here we go. Before I introduce these two guys to you on stage, they're going to talk to you quickly about their markets, but I wanted to let you know that we are the Canadian government, Global Affairs Canada. We are in 23 of the 28 EU countries. We're not in all of them because some of them are so small that we cover them from the neighboring countries. For example, Luxembourg. We're not in Luxembourg. We're in Belgium. So we cover Luxembourg from Belgium. But we have 23 embassies in the EU, in the 28 countries. But the good news is that we actually have 28 points of service for businessmen and women because we've got 3 offices in Germany and we have 2 in Spain. So it all adds up to 28. But there they are up there on the map, and that's where we have Canadian diplomats like Christopher and Simon Pierre up there on stage, and locally engaged staff. Let me tell you, the Canadians come and go. We go overseas for a posting of, usually in Europe, it's 4 years, and you can be extended for an extra year. So maybe some folks stay there for 5. But the locally engaged staff have been there all the way through, and they are amazing. They really know the market. They know everybody. We can give you advice. We can give you guidance. The Trade Commissioner Service, the TCS, sign up for it. I'm telling you, our studies have shown by our Chief Economist in Global Affairs Canada that when an SME uses the Trade Commissioner Service, their exports are higher than a company that does not use our services. So again, they're free. Please use them. All right, now we're going to go on to 2 presentations by 2 of my colleagues on the stage. The first is Simon Pierre Réon. He is the Senior Trade Commissioner at the Canadian Embassy in Austria, Vienna, Austria. This guy is the latest darling on the Cross Canada tour. His knowledge of the Sound of Music show tunes is second to none. He, in his spare time, likes to play the role of Captain Von Trapp, way off Broadway. And I can tell you that this guy is so inspired by the story and by Christopher Plummer that he has 4 children already, and has just 2 more to go before he has his own family of the Von Trapp singers. Simon Pierre, over to you.
Thank you. So good morning, everyone. My name is Simon Pierre Réaume. I'm originally from Quebec City, and I'm currently signed to the Embassy of Canada to Austria. I love mountains, and so Austria is a great place for me. I find it extremely difficult to concentrate this morning with this wonderful view, so please forgive me. I'm sure many of you have been to Austria and know Austria. The Sound of Music, of course, is very well known, and I will spare you my yodeling this morning. You probably all know that Mozart comes from Austria, and of course the mountains, which are lovely in Austria as they are here. You may know a little bit less about Austria as a place to do business, and that's what I will talk to you about this morning. But first, in Europe, we're never really far from history. Of course, it's a place that has a lot of history. And just to explain Austria a little bit to you this morning, let me give you a 30-second introduction to Austrian history. So 1918, the Austrian-Hungarian Empire falls. 1938, Germany, Nazi Germany annexes Austria. And actually this was commemorated in Vienna 2 weeks ago, the 80th anniversary of that. 1945, the country is liberated and is occupied. And not many people know that Austria was actually divided into 4 occupation zones, just like Germany, and the same in Vienna. The city was also split into 4. However, unlike Germany, in 1955, so 10 years later, it was allowed to become independent again as its own country. But the condition for the Russians to let go of their zone was that the country was to be neutral. And so Austria is a neutral country to this day because of that. The Iron Curtain fell and ran actually only 50 kilometers from Vienna, so it was really the last Western outpost before the East began. And so until the 1990s, not much happened, but then the curtain fell and Austria retook its place at the center of Europe. And the economy boomed. It joined the EU in 1995, and then the EU expanded to include Eastern Europe. And this is when Austria really became a center of business for headquarters that were dealing with Central and Eastern Europe. And it was building on, of course, its roots as the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, in that it had many cultural and historical connections to the East. And so to this day, it's a very important center in Central Eastern Europe. And today, this brings us to today. It's a small country, home to 8.7 million consumers. It's a wealthy and developed market, so the GDP per person is about equivalent to what we have here in Canada. It's an export powerhouse. So of course, if you look at the map, Austria is a very small country surrounded by 8 different countries, and so it exports a lot, it trades a lot. One measure that they use in Austria is the export ratio, and what they take is the amount of exports divided by the country's GDP. And to compare, Canada has an export ratio of 31%. If you look at Austria, this ratio reaches 51.6%, so it really is an export powerhouse. And there's many small and medium companies, actually I should say medium companies, that are top in their niches. So they're the best at what they do. They export a lot, sometimes up to 90% of their production, 95% of their production. Not usually well known to the public because they're more active in the B2B sphere. And they're called hidden champions. It's a term that's used in the German-speaking area. And Austria is home to a lot of those hidden champions there. And for Canadian companies, it's interesting to partner with them, so to supply them, to join their supply chains, because these are very successful and stable companies. And so they're good partners for us. Another reason that is interesting for Canadian companies to come to Austria is to find innovation partners. Austrian companies are technology leaders in just about everything that they're active in. Austria has the second highest research and development intensity in the European Union after Sweden. And Canada is actually identified as a priority country. There are funding programs in Austria, and one in particular that's called Beyond Europe, to encourage Austrian companies to partner with foreign companies outside of the European Union. And Canada is one of the most popular countries for those partnerships. And this allows the Canadian company to get up to 20% of the project costs funded directly to the company. Austrians in general love Canadians. We're very similar countries, of course, with the landscape, but also with the people. And so when Canadians come over to Austria, usually we have an open door. So it's easy to meet companies, to discuss with them, and to see opportunities for partnerships. Austria is also similar to Canada in that it has a big neighbor that my colleague Christopher will speak about a bit later, Germany, and we have the USA. So we share a border with them, we share a language, and also our economies are very integrated. And to do business, there's the Canadian Embassy in Vienna. We focus on 3 main sectors of interest, but we also cover all industry sectors. One of them is ICT. There's a lot of demand for information communication technology solutions in Austria. So whether it be in mobile networks, Internet of Things, etc. We focus also on green building. There's a lot of partnerships going on in the green building sector. In fact, the city of Vienna and the city of Vancouver 2 weeks ago signed a partnership agreement to improve energy efficiency in buildings in both cities, so there's a lot going on there. Clean technology is also very active. Austria generates about 60% of its power through hydroelectricity. There's a lot of initiatives on smart cities to reduce energy consumption in the cities, in transportation, etc. And also on the smart grid, so all Austrian homes will be equipped with smart meters in 2020. The embassy is organizing a Canada Pavilion at the European Utilities Week. This is a show that will take place in the fall this year for everything dealing with utilities, so electricity, water, telecom, etc. So if you have clients who are in these areas, please come see me. I would be very interested in getting their contact information. Some things about doing business in Austria, and this is just an example, of course. There are 28 countries in Europe, so 28 different ways of doing business. But for Austria specifically, the regulations, so there are many levels of rules in Austria from the EU and then from at the national level, provincial level, municipal level even. So it's a lot for Canadian exporters to know. However, I'd like to always remind people that Canada is also a highly regulated country, and at the end of the day, the rules are different, but it's nothing that we can't work with, of course, and the embassy is there also to help and to advise on those rules. And Austria, in particular, also likes proven solutions. So Austrian companies are very innovative. They like to be on the leading edge, but the bleeding edge is not for them. They like to know that there's a true return on investment before they will commit to something that it's been proven elsewhere. So leading, but not bleeding. In-person contact is key, as is the case in many markets. So we always advise companies to come to Austria often to maintain a good relationship with their partners. They also tend to prefer to have after-sales service available in Europe and in the German-speaking area, more specifically. That's just a preference. They like to be able to pick up the phone if there's a problem, speak to someone who's in their time zone, who speaks their language, and who's able to solve the problem for them. And also the tendering processes, when we're talking about public contracts, that can be often long and cumbersome as well. However, with CETA, it does give us access to that market, which is a very large market as well. As we heard earlier also, tariffs are practically all eliminated, so that gives us an advantage as well, an advantage that the Americans don't have. So it's very important for us to be out there and to be out there now while we have a preferential access to the European market. So, and the doors in general are open for anything that is high quality in Austria. So quality is really the name of the game here. And CETA is actually an opportunity for your clients to diversify in Europe. And so to look at new markets, there's 28 different markets in Europe. Many of them, so some of the smaller countries like Austria, you wouldn't necessarily think to look at first, but the opportunities are there. So it's really important to remind your clients to look at those different countries as well. And just my last point, don't forget to work with us in the Trade Commissioner service. We have trade commissioners in all embassies in Europe and also in all embassies in the world, really. We can really help you save maybe a couple of steps when you do your research. We can recommend events for you to attend. We can find some data for you. We can suggest partners, suggest potential clients for your clients as well. tell you about the regulations. If your clients are planning a trip, we can also provide key contacts for them to meet, etc. So of course, the companies, your clients, still make the sale. That's their job, and they know their products. But we're here to maybe help save a few steps along the way. And as Sanjeev was saying, a lot of our staff, actually the majority of our staff, is local. So in my case, in my section, I have 3 trade commissioners. All 3 are born and raised in Austria, live and breathe Austrian business, so they really know all about this. So it's a great point of contact for your clients to get to know Austria before they get there and get some good recommendations. And on this, I want to thank you, and I hope that you'll consider looking for new business opportunities in Austria. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon Pierre. Our next speaker is Christopher McLean. He's going to give you a quick overview of the German market, and then we'll have time for a couple of questions. Christopher has had 3 postings to Germany. He speaks German fluently. Luckily for us, he hasn't forgotten how to speak English, so he's going to do the presentation in English, because he's also been posted to China and to London. But this is his 3rd posting. There are 3 offices, as I mentioned, in Germany, and he's going to tell you all about it. Christopher, over to you.
Great. Yeah, Sanjeev, somewhat kind introduction, kept referring to the panda bear. That was my last assignment. I was in Beijing for 3 years and actually had a lot to do with Alberta there. But actually, as it happens, the symbol for this city of Berlin is the bear. It's a different bear, more like a brown bear. I'm kind of a grizzled version of the brown bear. But yeah, a little more aggressive, a little more out there than the panda bear, and one that we can certainly work with. I want you to think a bit about Germany today for a variety of reasons. First of all, it is the 4th largest economy in the world. I think we mentioned US, China, we mentioned Japan, and then it's Germany. And that offers opportunities in all sorts of ways. It's also, of course, a major exporter. We hear a lot about Germany's trade surplus, and it's true. They have very strong companies, very strong global presence. That's actually another opportunity for us. The fact of the matter is, both geographically and especially economically, Germany is the core of the EU. For almost any given European country, Germany is their #1 trading partner. It's a bit different for Canada. We do pretty well in the German market. Our exports are in the order of $4.1 billion for goods and another $2.1 billion for services. That makes it interesting as a foreign market. But when you look at Germany's imports, which are $1.8 trillion, I think we could probably do a bit better in terms of taking advantage of what Germany has to offer. So when you're talking to your companies, please remind them that actually there with CETA, there's some really interesting opportunities now. We've been talking to companies in Manitoba and Alberta for the last few days. And here in Alberta, I've been talking about things like agri-food. I've been talking about clean tech. I've been talking about ICT and aerospace too. Where if you have a unique product, something special, there are definitely opportunities for you in Germany. Now I say there has to be a unique product because there's a lot of competition in Germany. There are a lot of domestic firms in Germany that produce these things. They're surrounded by a number of EU member states who themselves are very competitive suppliers to Germany of things like agri-food or ICT. But you think of specific niches. Think, for example, organic food, which Alberta produces plenty of. Organic food accounts for about 10% of the $75 billion worth of food imports that Germany has every year. So that's about $7.5 billion worth of organics. So if you've got something of or some of your clients have something to offer there, there are definite opportunities. And again, this applies to a number of sectors. But actually what I'd like to focus on now is investment. Many of you are involved directly in trying to promote foreign investment into Alberta. And there too, Germany is a very important partner for us. German investment in Canada is currently, the stock is about $15.6 billion. And a lot of this investment is in bricks and mortar. It's in manufacturing here in Canada. It's good old-fashioned investment that we really appreciate because it generates a lot of jobs and it generates a lot of exports. And we figure there's plenty more to be done here. And it's done by some of the leading companies that you'll see listed, you know, the Volkswagens, the Siemenses, and so on. But it's also done by hundreds of smaller, highly specialized firms. Germany is somewhat unique in that they have something called a Mittelstand, middle-sized companies, which are often still privately owned, even family-owned, but are world champions in their very specific niche. And how do they achieve that? It's by the strength of German engineering and their investment in innovation. So these are world beaters in supplying something extremely special to the whole world. So companies like that, what do they look for when they're wanting to establish abroad? What they're really looking for is smarts. And Todd was talking earlier today about what Alberta has to offer in this regard, in terms of an educated workforce, in terms of strong research institutes, in terms of great universities. These are all things which, in the mind of the German investor, give Canada a great profile compared to other North American jurisdictions and even globally. Because, okay, yes, of course, you have to have industrial land for them available at a reasonable price. Yes, you have to have a reasonable tax package for them. But actually, what is far more important for them is you have the people that they can employ. You have the skilled labor, you have the researchers, you have the management, and you have the institutions to generate more of this over time. And this is what's going to grab a German investor and make this company interested in Alberta. So please, when you're thinking of Germany, focus on this as the key. And fortunately, Alberta is actually rather well positioned in this regard already. One great example is the Helmholtz group of research institutes in Germany, which for a number of years now has had a joint venture with the University of Alberta. Helmholtz is focused on that last step of getting research commercialized. We love that sort of stuff, because that's what we're trying to do too. And their research focus will change from year to year, but they've been working together with Alberta on things like energy storage, which is a great one on the clean tech side of things. And it's by having these kinds of innovation partnerships with Alberta that you're going to generate the startups that are going to generate larger companies that in turn will be eventually generating exports for Alberta. Now, having said that, well, I've mentioned that the competition is stiff, and that applies to investment promotion too. Again, because German firms are often quite private, even the mindset is still very much the family-owned one, they really focus, whether it's on trade or on investment, on the reliability of their partners. And that means that as investment promoters, they expect you to come for 2 or 3 years, a couple times a year, to come and tell them why they should be interested in your community. Investment is always a long-term game, but in the case of Germany, that's really true, that you need to come by them and remind them and repeat your offer to them, give them some update on what might be of interest here in Alberta to them. And eventually they'll say, okay, these guys in Alberta, they are serious. They're our kind of people. They're persistent. They're there for the longer term. Maybe we should give them a serious consideration. Now that's, of course, a bit tricky to do. It costs money to travel all the way to Europe. That's where your trade commissioner comes in. That's where my team comes in Berlin. Because we can be there for you between your visits to help stay in touch with the company, to help them keep focused on Canada and Alberta. I'm very fortunate in that I have 2 officers who are dedicated solely to investment promotion. They are locally engaged officers, and any of you who've dealt with Germany probably know Detlef Engler or Hendrik Taulen. They've been doing this for 20 years. They are experts, and they are keen. They are there for those companies on a day-to-day basis. Essentially, we promote ourselves as free consultants for these companies in terms of developing their business in North America. And that really works because, again, we're in their time zone, we speak their language, and we know Canada. So keep these folks in mind and let us know of your interest in Germany, and we'll work with you on that. Finally, I would remind you that one of the most interesting provisions out of CETA for the investment side of things are the provisions on labor mobility. In fact, the CETA doesn't do a whole lot for investment because we were already very generous with each other between Canada and the EU when it came to investment protection. We've added a few bells and whistles. You know, we're not going to review our European investment unless it meets the threshold of $1.5 billion, just to make it a bit easier for them. But, you know, we were already very transparent. We were all already very fair. We were, you know, on both sides in terms of how we treated our investors. Labor mobility has also been an issue, though. An investor would come, they'd want to set up things, and they want to send some managers over to get the operation up and running, and that's where things would start dragging out. That's a whole lot easier now, thanks to the labor mobility provisions. So keep that in mind as a key selling point. Also keep in mind what Brexit means for your companies and also for, you know, your focus in Europe. The UK has been the traditional stepping stone for a lot of Canadian companies going to Europe. 40% of our exports to the EU are actually with the UK. That's going to change. You know, we might want it to be different, but the fact of the matter is by the end of 2020, the UK will no longer be in the EU. And that means that if your company is actually setting up in Europe with the idea of serving all of the European market, or if your focus is on getting European investment in here, you're going to have to think of some alternatives to the UK. Yes, of course, the UK will remain significant in its own right to us, but you've got to think of where else in Europe it might make sense for you or for your companies to set up. And in that regard, I'd point out actually that, you know, countries like Germany or the Netherlands actually, you know, anybody involved in international business actually speaks pretty good English. So if that was your first concern, ease of doing business, well, there are definite alternatives to the UK. And with CETA, I think that makes sense for us overall. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope that you'll come away with some new inspiration about what can be done with Europe and with Germany, and I look forward to hearing from you in Berlin.